Is it possible to develop a net zero LNG in BC in a manner that supports economic self-determination for First Nations, contributes to national and global efforts to mitigate climate change, finances renewable energy infrastructure that is essential to the future decarbonized economy of British Columbia, and to help pay for the protection and recovery of ecosystems in First Nations territories, which are the foundation of their cultures and valuable carbon sinks? The First Nations Climate Initiative has determined that it is. Here we have the opportunity to talk to leaders of the initiatives to find out how. Our leaders are reforging historical relationships reminiscent of the Grease Trail in their contemporary efforts to work together for the benefit of their communities and the global community. The Halfway River First Nations, whose territory is right in the middle of the Montagny Plain, where most of BC's gas comes from. The Halfway River First Nation is taking control of development in their territory together with their neighbors to make sure things happen on their terms. We also have Chief Councillor Crystal Smith of the Haisla Nation and Eva Clayton, President of the Nisga'a Nation. Both the Haisla and the Nisga'a have their own projects, and they are very cognizant of the issues faced by Halfway River, which is why they are working together with other nations to make sure their individual and collective interests are addressed. Let's hear their stories from their perspectives on how the First Nations Climate Initiative can contribute to the global effort for the next 7 generations. First up, I'd like to introduce Crystal Smith of the Haisla Nation. Over to you, Crystal.
Thank you, Andrew. The Haisla Nation will start exporting net zero LNG from our Cedar facility in the not too distant future. Together with the economic and social benefits we have derived from the construction and partial ownership of the Coastal GasLink pipeline and our business relationship with LNG Canada, our Cedar LNG project is revitalizing our community. We are looking at poverty in the rearview mirror. Our people are moving into new homes, working at well-paid jobs, beginning to enjoy the living conditions that are the norm for a majority of Canadians. We have been working on restoring our precious ecosystem for decades. Now we have more capacity to make this happen. We will protect and recover our salmon and ulakan, regrow our forests as carbon storehouses. And like Halfway River, we are recovering the ecosystems for our culture and the climate. The construction of CGL and LNG Canada and Cedar is bringing billions of dollars into the provincial and national economy. The federal and provincial revenues from this economic activity will help pay for the renewable energy transmission and generation capacity needed for the future economy, including the electrification of pipelines and LNG facilities. We don't live in a bubble here on the west coast of Canada. What happens in Asia happens to us. We must work with Asian countries to help them reduce their GHG emissions while we build our own decarbonized economy. This means providing them with low to zero carbon alternatives to the energy they currently depend upon.
Thank you very much, Chief Councillor Crystal Smith of the Haisla Nation. What an amazing example of your community and your leadership on behalf of the Haisla people. Now I'd like to turn it over to the President of the Nisga'a Nation, Eva Clayton. Eva Clayton, can you please share with us your community and nation's development?
Like the Haisla, the Nisga'a are building a net zero LNG facility on our lands. Our communities need this development to help us alleviate the poverty that has plagued our people. This development will bring prosperity to many nations who will jointly own the pipeline and the transmission line that services the pipeline and the LNG plant. The new transmission line will create many opportunities for new net zero development in other sectors like mining. It will also enable new renewable energy projects to feed into the grid to meet the needs of the decarbonized economy of the future. Like Crystal says, who is going to pay for this essential infrastructure. The Nisga'a are implementing nature-based solutions on our lands. We are protecting and restoring our forests as carbon sinks that will help recover the climate for many decades to come. Through our work at the First Nations Climate Initiative, we have learned that the LNG that we export will help other countries to decarbonize their economies. Many Asian countries still rely on burning coal to generate electricity. Switching from coal to gas is an important step in the energy transition globally. But it is not the only step. They can go further and use natural gas as a feedstock for manufacturing hydrogen and solid carbon without producing GHGs. Our partners in the First Nations Climate Initiative, the Metlakatla Nation specifically, are demonstrating this new technology here at home in Prince Rupert. They are going to start producing hydrogen as a new fuel for use in the port of Prince Rupert and for international shipping. They will also produce graphite, which is a critical mineral used in battery production. Our customers in Asian countries in Asia can do this as well. So gas is not just a fuel, it is a feedstock as well. Like a tree, you can burn it or you can make it into building materials.
Thank you to Chief Counselor Crystal Smith and President Eva Clayton for your leadership and your inspiration. Let's go full circle back to where we started. You are achieving economic self-determination for First Nations by leading these developments on your terms, while addressing each other's interests. You are contributing to the national and global efforts to mitigate climate change. Your projects are financing renewable energy infrastructure that is essential to the future decarbonized economy of British Columbia through new transmission lines and renewable energy generation facilities, and paying for the protection and recovery of ecosystems in your territories with carbon credits. And these ecosystems are the foundation of your cultures and valuable carbon sinks. I'd like to introduce Robert Johnston. RJ is an internationally recognized expert in the global energy transition. Tell us, Robert, how significant is what you've heard in the context of global efforts to mitigate climate change? Over to you, Robert.
Thank you, Andrew, for the kind introduction. It's Robert Johnston here. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm the Executive Director of the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University, former CEO of Eurasia Group, and pleased to be working with the First Nations Climate Initiative on this important project. I am working in my independent capacity here, not officially representing Eurasia Group or Columbia, but trying to bring my experience as a global observer of natural gas markets and energy transition and provide some independent perspective for the FNCI and their partners on the potential for Western Canadian gas as a contributor to Asian energy security, a potential contributor to Asian climate strategy, and as an economic opportunity for both Canada and its Asian trading partners. So we're doing some research to look at how those trends are likely to unfold and where there's opportunity and risk for Western Canadian LNG. Certainly, the climate issue is front of mind for everyone. And I think there are definitely opportunities when we look at Canadian gas resources plugging into potentially displaced coal in Asia, particularly in Japan and Korea, possibly in China. There's potential new pathways like producing blue ammonia for power generation or shipping. The question will really be, can the Canadian gas resources be delivered in a way that is both sustainable, but also price competitive with other suppliers that are out there, like the Qataris, the Russians, the Americans, and others. We also have to look at the question of energy security, certainly at a time when Russia and Ukraine's war has disrupted global gas supplies, when we've seen extreme price volatility, I would say there is another window open for Western Canadian gas with those Asian buyers because of the disruptions in Russian supply, but the buyers do remain quite price sensitive. And we do have to account for the possibility that the Russian gas could come back into the market some point down the road, maybe 5-10 years down the road. That is a possibility to consider as well. But certainly, I think energy security is something that does favor the Canadian gas resource. And then there's the market considerations. Who else is happening with other suppliers? What are the price trends? And what are the different price sensitivities between the buyers in Northeast Asia, such as Japan and Korea, versus China, versus Southeast Asia, versus India, all of which have different price sensitivities. And I think the unique attributes of these First Nations-backed British Columbia LNG projects around ESG, Indigenous participation, low methane intensity, the electrification and potential low carbon intensity nature of the gas. How does that balance versus other considerations like price? And will those buyers, the utilities in Japan, Korea, the industrial off-takers in Japan and Korea, will they pay a premium for those types of ESG attributes? And if so, how much? And that's something I think they were going to dig into the paper as well. So to summarize, I'm really excited to be part of this project to provide some independent perspective on the potential for BC LNG to be a part of the Asian energy security and climate transition. Thank you.
There you go, folks. Thank you very much, RJ, for your insight in regards to the First Nations Climate Initiative. I would also like to thank Chief Darlene Hunter of the Halfway River First Nations, Chief Crystal Smith of the Haisla Nation, and President Eva Clayton of the Nisga'a Nation for all of their hard work and dedication to the First Nations Climate Initiative.